What is a personal story you have that you don't tell because it sounds made up? Not nearly as exciting as some of these stories, but in college I was walking through downtown. It was not a good area to be in by any means. There were 4 stabbings and 2 murders there my first semester at that college, and I was a 17-year-old girl alone in the city, and this dude called me from an alleyway. He goes, "Hey, kid, you like Dalmatians, like the movie?" And I, being the genius that I was, responded, "Yeah, like in a fire truck." So this guy says to follow him down this alley to his truck because he has puppies, and of course I follow him. They're puppies, and this would be way too cliche to actually be so dude luring young co-eds to their death. And I kid you not, he had like 8 pups and their mother in the back of this rusted junker between these buildings, and let me play with them for like 10 minutes before I walked back to my dorms. He wanted me take one, but our dormitory just got busted for hiding squirrels and cats inside the week before. So anyways, that's the story of how I followed a stranger down an alley because he told me he had puppies, and he actually had puppies. I went to a July 4th party at Mark Zuckerberg's house once and he grilled me a burger. We were cruising around Huntington Beach in my friend's Mercury Comet back in the late 80s. Racing people randomly and generally being obnoxious. We are at red light and next to us is a little old lady in her nondescript Audi. My buddy guns the engine a few times as we hoot and holler at her. She turns her head slowly and with a wry smile puts her hand wheel. She is wearing those leather driving gloves, the ones with all the holes on the fingers. Light turns green and she absolutely smoked us. We were stunned and just watched her speed off. The story sounds like a scene from some 80s John Hughes movie. But it happened. My grandfather named Burger King's Whopper. He was friends with several of the founders of Burger King and they used to get together and hang out and play poker. They were chatting one night and trying to come up with a name for one of Burger King's upcoming burgers, and my grandfather suggested the name the Whopper. It was probably one of many suggestions and nothing came of it at the time. He was offered a position at the company, but turned it down and decided to open up a Burger Castle restaurant instead. Not too long after, Burger King announced their new burger and it was named the Whopper. My family could be heirs to a Burger King fortune, but my grandfather was always stubborn and wanted to do his own thing. I was held at gunpoint in Oakland. I accidentally made a joke to the robber. He laughed so hard he let us go. I got very sick when I was in middle school. Like seriously sick. I wasn't even able to walk. I used to crawl to bathroom, standing up straight used to make everything look inverted. I was also getting weird rashes on my body. I also had very severely headaches, nonstop for months. We went to many doctors, but nothing worked. Painkillers did nothing, doctors couldn't diagnose the disease. Then one day, I woke up and it was gone. Months of pain gone in an instant. You just reminded me of the time my husband was a hostage at a bar. One of the regulars came in, drank a beer with everyone and then pulled out a gun. He said his wife was screwing his best friend and he'd had enough. He didn't want to live anymore and he hated his wife and wanted her to suffer too. So, he said, anyone who wants to get out, go after we have a drink. He poured a few shots for all of them. Then knowing that the cops had been called, he fired a couple of shots into the ceiling. All the guys, including my husband, said, "Man, don't do this," but he hustled them out the back. Then he kicked the front door of the bar open and started firing into the ground while running for his car. He got shot 17 times and died instantly. But he was nice enough to tell all the guys goodbye and he'd put his wallet on the bar to pay for all of their drinks. I guess he wanted to apologize. I know, because I called my husband and said, "Hey, what are you up to?" And he said, "Oh hey, I'm a hostage." I got dengue fever from a mosquito bite. And wound up with renal failure caused complications. When I got sent back to America for treatment, the doctors kept coming in with interns and shit cause I was a novel case study apparently and not something commonly seen where I'm from, but is more common in countries where dengue is a huge issue. When I tell people I almost died from a mosquito bite, they think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. I was in congestive heart failure as well as kidney failure and gained 60 to 70 pounds in a week from my kidneys shutting down and a lack of health care due to a communication/language barrier. It was an insane time. A crazy homeless guy once chased me home. Luckily, I ran into my apartment building before he caught me. I tell that story, but with most people leave out the fact that his hands and pants were covered in blood. It just sounds too horror movie outlandish. I went on a solo hike and got lost in the woods for 4.5 days. I haven't eaten much other than some snacks I packed and very minimal water. I was definitely dehydrated and probably should have went to the hospital, but just went home and got ready for work the next day and acted like nothing happened. No one would believe me anyway, so I don't even mention it. I was in college and was at a bar drinking with my friends. I went to get a drink at a bar, but it was packed, so I had to find a spot and it ended up being away from my friends. I was already a little drunk, so I started chatting to the guy next to me while I waited to be served. He was a bit older than me, but not like ancient, so I just had a friendly convo. Anyway, he ends up asking me if I can get him some pills. Said he had back problems and wanted painkillers. I was drunk, so I was like, yeah sure, I know a guy I will see if he can get you some, and I went to the bathroom to text him. But when I was in the bathroom I had a change of heart and I thought more about it and decided I wasn't gonna help him. I was thinking about how opioids have fucked up some of my friends, so I wasn't gonna be a part of it. I went back to the guy who was still waiting and I said, you know what? Fuck that. Pills are bad and will lead to bad things. I have too many friends that have had their lives fucked up on those, and I am not gonna help you out. Good luck. I went to turn to leave, but before I could he pulled out his wallet and flashed a badge and then said, good decision. I was shocked and relieved and all the emotions all at once. I was so happy I didn't give my buddy away or anything else. I was so glad. Anyway, he then asked me not to say anything to anyone and said he normally never reveals that he's undercover, but could tell that in my heart ID had some friends get fucked up on it and wanted to let me know he wasn't gonna go down that path. I've told my friends about it later, but nobody has ever believed me. I can still see the badge in my head right now. Had little dots on the ends of the star. I was 21, studying in London, and happened to notice Megadeth were playing that night, all the days before easy internet access, so I grabbed the tube and headed to Camden to find tickets. On the way there, while riding the train, I noticed a girl wearing a Megadeth hoodie, so I approached her to ask if she knew whether tickets would be available at the venue, and she said the show was sold out. A guy overheard this conversation, confirmed there were no more tickets, and asked me if I really wanted to go, to which I enthusiastically replied yes. He said, we're opening for them. Here, if you buy our CD for £10, I'll get you on the list. It was a Diamond Head tour member. He said he was their guitarist, but I'm not sure I believe that, and at this point I don't remember. Diamond Head wasn't a band I followed. Long story short, this is how I ended up seeing a kick-ass show with Diamond Head opening for Megadeth that night, and having a really long conversation with Dave Mustaine at the after party. I actually posted a thread very similar to this, what's a story you have that sounds made up, some years ago, precisely for this incident, smiley face. Not me, but my dad lived a wild and unbelievable life. He was a world-wandering vagabond who joined the Navy at 16 by giving his older brothers information. Back in the 1960s, my dad was in a plane crash, small plane, and it went down in the desert near Mexico. They didn't know what to do. So they split up, two went in one direction, one went another, and my dad went his own way. They thought one of them would run in to help that way. My dad ended up somewhere in Mexico and never went back. He just hung around and traveled all over Central and South America. After almost a year, he decided it was time to go back home. But he ran out of cash or had no cash. So he sold his watch for a motorcycle. Used that to get to Mexico. Then, he sold/traded that motorcycle for a car. My dad was a mechanic. He could make any POS with an engine run for a bit, at least. Then drove north toward the US. He had no documentation. So he sold the car, walked through a ravine/ditch back into the US. When he actually made it to his brother's place through a combination of walking and hitchhiking, his brother and one of the guys from the plane crash were sitting on the porch drinking beers. They thought my dad had died. My dad thought the other guy died. They drank beers, played cards, and shot the shit. Years later, before I was born, my dad told my mom he was going to get the watch back. He drove from Chicago to Mexico. Took a bus to some place in Chiapas, IRC. Found the guy he sold the watch to, bought it back, and then drove all the way back to Chicago. I have the watch. We have pictures of my dad as a young man living it up in Mexico, India, Germany, UK, the Philippines, Hawaii, all over the US. Postcards he wrote to his brother, and so on. Places that don't even exist anymore. My dad died when I was 16 years old. Edit, I got a lot of messages about my dad from folks. He was indeed a cool dad, and I loved him a lot. Thank you for the kind words about him. Thank you for watching, friend. Until next time, and remember to stay hydrated.